Start. Okay, so welcome to the weekly colloquium of the School of Astrophysics. To have Ananda Chowdhury from the Electronics and Telecommunications Department, Engineering Department of Chowdhury University. Professor Chowdhury did, like many other speakers of this colloquium series, Professor Chowdhury also did his undergrad at the erstwhile Presidency College in the Department of Physics. From there, he went to the Science College, where he did BTech in Radio Physics and Electronics, and then an MTech from Jadavpur. And then he did his PhD from University of Georgia in the US, and a postdoctoral stint at the National Institute of Health. And then he came back and became a faculty member at Jadavpur University Electronics Department, where he has been ever since. Professor Chowdhury is one of the few of the expertise of Professor Chowdhury is actually related to pattern recognition and computer vision. And we know that although he's not exactly directly talking to astrophysics or talking about astrophysical applications today, but we have heard talks before where we have seen how important it is to recognize particular patterns in astrophysics. And so today we are going to get a more sort of from engineer's perspective and a physicist perspective as well. So we are eager to hear from him. Professor Chowdhury.
Also, Prof was talking about clusters later.
So, thank you, Professor Rituan, for your kind introduction, and I will start with two reasons like why I became nervous when I accepted the invitation. So first is this is the place where I used to sit over there, right? Like you, and like our reverend teachers, like they used to teach us. So definitely, like it's a reason to be nervous to be on the other side of the bench. So that's number one. And secondly, like I was thinking, like what would be the the right way to connect to the audience, because it's a bit apparently far from probably what you do in traditional astrophysics. But then I felt like there are interesting connections. So I mean, I will mention like some of this in this talk, and of course, like we'll talk about like what we do or what we have been doing in our group over a decade or so. So let's start with this. So this is really the plan. So I give you a background. So a little bit, of course, like because these are by this module is going to be a separate courses on computer vision, pattern recognition, and these have been really boosted over the years by this machine learning, and nowadays, like I think probably many of you have heard about it, like the deep learning. But then I'm going to talk about like applications in different spheres, and then I will mention like two very different problems. But the general thing is again, which is in really along the line of my talk. Like, so can you recognize the pattern? So one is like a brain tumor segmentation, like which we have been doing with Institute of Neuroscience in Kolkata. And the other work was surveillance, right? So where we talk about another interesting pattern recognition problem with an open set, mention what it is, open set personal identity. So let's talk about this computer vision. Like so, if you think about it, like it's concerned with. So this is, by the way, BMVA is an acronym for British Machine Vision Association. So they have a kind of formulated. It's like this is basically what computer vision does. So with the automatic extraction, analysis, and understanding of useful information, it could be from a single image, could be from a video, and video can be also conceived as a sequence of images, which are like video frames. And it involves the development of theoretical and algorithmic basis to achieve automatic visual understanding. So this is very interesting. And if you extend kind of the input data beyond images.
I'm just interrupting it because this projector is this side. Is it possible for you to?
Like this, that's right. Right. Okay, sure. So if you extend the domain of input, like which is beyond, let's say, images and videos, it could be even data, right? Like so, this is what is pattern recognition is concerned with. Is a little bit broader. So it's concerned with the automatic discovery of regularities in data, actually. Like so. So this data could be like also non-image, could be also non-image data. For example, like if you really browse through something known as like an UCI machine learning repository, right? So there you will see like a lot of data, like maybe disease data, maybe even astronomical data. And then you can do a lot of things like grouping of this data, like meaningful grouping, like clustering and so on. So this is one typical computer vision task. I mean, we put a plural because like there is actually a series of tasks, and the tasks get a little bit harder, like if you move from left to right. So on the extreme left, like you have given an image, and the question is like, you have to tell like what the image contains. Like there could be many other such images, but here, as you can see, this is a classification. So you just say like there is a cat. The second question becomes a little bit more difficult than the first one, because you are saying here that not only the image contains cat, but also you localize where the cat is, right? So then you put a bounding box. So it's like a localization, and you are dealing with a single object. Now, if you extend, so let's say on this image, like where it's a problem of object detection, now you have like a cat and the duck and the dog and so on. So it becomes like dealing with multiple objects. And then it becomes even complicated, like when you do something known as an instance segmentation. So you are, identifying like, like not only really these different, objects, but also, or maybe let's say like different animals here, but also their contours. So this is, the more difficult. So when you go from left to right, things become more difficult. And all, if you remember, are really this, automatic analysis of like patterns. They were always trying to find out a pattern and trying to do like, different tasks, or trying to carry out like different tasks. So a very simple, pattern recognition system, of course, like it's much more complicated like than this, but like if you think about a very simple, very primitive pattern recognition system, so it has a data acquisition. So for example, in case of image, like the common way is to have like, a camera, but then there are different types of cameras. You can have also a thermal camera, you can have nowadays something known as like an event camera and so on and so forth. And then you do something known as like a feature extraction, which is you describe like something like, for example, like if you, let's say think about this bottle, like you can say, okay, it's roughly a cylindrical shape, like it has like colors of white and blue and so on and so forth. So these are like descriptors. And then there is a decision making. So maybe you are, okay, thank you. So then you can say that, okay, this is a bottle, or maybe instead of bottle, like if I give you like a duster, you can have a separate set of descriptors, and then you infer like, okay, this is a duster, right? This is not really a bottle and so on. So these are very basic, and you can do like, there could be a large number of features. You can do something known as a dimensionality reduction, and there are many other ways to, work.
No, it has in her.
Oh, this is a point.
Yeah, that's the point.
So next, as I have mentioned, that this computer vision pattern recognition has been getting enriched through inputs from machine learning. So this machine learning is a branch of artificial intelligence, like AI, remember, like, so nowadays, like, if you say, yeah, it's only machine learning, but it's not really. There are certain things like search and all these, like, very traditional, AI algorithms that would be like NLPs and so on. So machine learning is a branch of artificial intelligence, AI, and computer science, which focuses on the use of data and algorithms to imitate, the way that the humans learn. So this is mainly the main thing. The way it's and human learn, we try to make a machine learn. So that's why it's the machine learning. And nowadays, like if you think about it, like so the machine learning have probably yielded to like something known as deep learning, though there could be very nice words like where you can combine like something by deep learning with machine learning methods and so on. But nowadays, like this deep learning has taken the center stage. So these are like if you think about like the traditional pattern recognition models, like for example, that the very basic building block which I had shown in this slide. You have this feature extraction. So this is basically the description. And what I did was like very like very simple descriptor, like okay, maybe the shape, and then maybe the bottle has these colors like blue and white and so on. But you can have very rich set of descriptions. So that's why like you have this instead of traditional pattern recognition, you have which has like limitations because we have kind of handcrafted features. Instead of that, like you can have very rich descriptors. So deep learning like seeks to learn features automatically through multiple layers. So I have some slides where I will show like how these multiple layers work. And this consists of like an input and output and multiple hidden layers from which they kind of like harness really the information and then try to have a very rich information representation of the object, the input, and then try to make a decision based on that. So if you think about the feature extraction, which is the most solid part of deep learning, like then it progressively extracts low to higher level features of the input. And naturally, like you have more number of layers, you have like more rich information extraction. So this is an example. If you see that in the input, then there are you have like this multiple hidden layers, and then as you can see here, like at the bottom, like there are different like primitive features, and as you go from like left to right, like these are getting enriched, right? And then finally, like you could identify really the correct output. So again, how you actually can recognize the correct features, there is one very important aspect, like is about how you can build really deep descriptors. But then the other very important component is the how you make also the inference. So the descriptors plus like inference would give you or would enable you to identify the correct patterns. So again, this is an example like where you can see that if you have this low, mid, and high level features, and these are in fact always like these are filters which would be eventually convolved with the image to get really the final classification output. So that's how it becomes very rich.
So by low level, you mean, and in this case, at least it meant that the low levels are more smooth features and the high level are more like small scale features.
Right, exactly. So it's actually like more sort of like discriminatory features would be like as you move along. But then these also play roles. So it's like gradually making the system adapt to a more complex identification problem. Yeah. So again, there are like very different deep learning networks, but the one which is probably very popular is called CNN, which is like a convolutional neural network. And then the convolution operation is very similar like to what has been done in traditional signal processing. So it's a deep network which can take an input image and assign importance, which are learnable weights and biases. So for example, like when you take these like individual features and convolve with the image, like you get really, so the filter has like weights, and then you put an additive bias, and then they learn through the system. And this is inspired by the human visual system. So learn multiple layers of transformations and so on. And if you look at this CNN building block, so you can see this is an input image, and there are a set of, the layers here, basically. So these are like, the convolution, and, this is known as rectified linear unit, this is spooling, and then it's multiple, instances of convolution plus ReLU plus spooling. And then finally, you do a flattening, then you have a fully connected layer, like a sort of, a matrix, like kind of flattened to a vector here, and then you make an inference based on, like the, which class it belongs. You can have some probability for that. So if you just like think about, the layers, like, here is a small, description. So if you have like an input layer, like this is essentially like the raw pixels of an image. So let's say an image is of size, 32 cross 32. And if it's a colored image, then a colored image has 3 channels, red, green, and blue. So we can have actually like in a grayscale image. So grayscale image will have different shades of intensity. So it's if it's like very dark, then it would be like black, it would be very bright, it would be like more towards like white. It's still not a colored image, but it has, depending upon like the number of bits, like so for an n-bit image, the intensity levels would vary between 0 to 2 to the power n minus 1. So this is still grayscale. But then when you have a colored image, so then you have like 3 channels usually, like so then you have like this R, G, and B, like the red, green, and blue. And then each of these channels can behave as like a separate grayscale. So when you process, like you have a 32 cross 32 image, but then you have 3 channels. That's what it makes it like 32 cross 32 plus 3. And then you have like a convolution layer. It's a typical convolution layer with, let's say, you have a number of features, then you get this dimension. And then, you want to add some element-wise activation. So this is like, it could be like a max function, max of 0x, like this kind of function. And so it's like a non-negative. And then you get like the output of ReLU. And then you do some downsampling to along really this spatial dimension. So this is like the image width and image height. And then you can get like a downsampled version. Then you kind of flatten like and make it like fully connected. So it could be like a single vector, and then you finally add a softmax kind of function to sort of get the probability of this image to belong to a certain class. So if you go back to this previous, so as you can see here, like these are different classes, and then you can say, okay, this image is probably, or the probability of this image to belong to this class card is this, and class truck is this, and so on. So this is sort of like a nutshell of CNN. So, I mean, the 2 very common terms which are used here are like parameters and hyperparameters. So for a if you think about parameters, this is what you learn from the system. This is like the weights and the biases. Again, the weights, are these really like the filters, like which then get converted with the image. Have additive bias. So this you learn from the system. And then there are certain things which are called hyperparameters, which are provided to the by the user. Like I'm an expert to the model. So like the number of hidden nodes, input features, learning rate, activation functions, and so on. And if you think about like this, how the experimental protocol is built. So you have training, testing, and validation. So it's kind of like on training, like it's a part of the data on which you train your system. Then you have a number of like the parameters, like this model hyperparameters. So you tune over the validation set, and then once you have that, then you kind of like test your results on really the test set, means like the unknown set which the system has not seen. So often you encounter problems like overfitting. It does well on the training data set, but it's not doing that well on the test set and so on. So you need to worry about like this overfitting problems. So with this kind of background, let me mention like the key challenges. There are several key challenges, and like you can have low contrast, and this is still mostly of like for an from an image or a video perspective, you need to handle different types of variations because like at where or at which setting like the image has been taken. There could be sparse and noisy levels, like there could be heterogeneous and unbalanced samples. I'll show you some examples like where you can have like different classes, let's say in an anomaly detection in a video. So for a normal video, you have more levels to train. But like if there is anomaly in the video, let's say there is some bomb has been hurled, and you are like kind of crowds are like moving in a in not so normal fashion, then those would be like anomalous. But then you have to remember that if just somebody runs fast, that does not really lead to anomaly. But then you don't have like so many training samples, and in those cases, like it's often important to have or to develop like unsupervised solutions, like where. So by supervised solutions, we mean that you have the training data, and then after seeing the training data, like you get trained, and then you test or examine your performance on the test data. But then for an unsupervised, like it's like on the fly. So you have based on the patterns, like you have different groups. So unsupervised models, developing unsupervised models are always hard. And then you can have this is for specifically for medical imaging problems, like anatomical locations of the organs like create always a big problem, because when you try to identify them, like one may be occluded by the others and so on. Scalability, like maybe it's working for a small. That's a general problem of algorithms, like whether that's why people are interested in complexity of the algorithms. Like you want to have polynomial time solutions, right? Like otherwise maybe if a algorithm runs in factorial or in exponential time, then when you work on a very large input, then that creates a problem. So these are some of the issues. And then let me show you certain applications from different spheres before I really discuss the two problems. So these are some of the areas on which we have been working, and I have a number of examples. And then I also included some so the application of pattern recognition in remote sensing has been there, and I also included some slides on astronomy. But then there are issues like autonomous navigations, like computer vision is very famous for that, like self-driving cars. And if you extend like pattern recognition like this, it could be like speech signals. So you do like the speech recognition and then this handwriting recognition. So there are lots of interesting application areas in which this computer vision pattern recognition can be applied. So let me show you some pictures in some of our works. Well, this was like, when I was a postdoc a long time back, but anyway. So this is in healthcare. So here the goal is to identify like the different organs and simultaneously identify different organs from, like the CT data. So as you can see here, that you can see like liver, you can see like, spleen, the kidney, and so on, the two kidneys and so on. So how can you recognize the patterns, right? So how can you identify like these different organs like simultaneously from the given CT data? So below, like there is an example like where one of my former PhD students, she worked on like lung nodule segmentation. So given a CT, and then how can you segment a lung nodule? Because these lung nodules are like precursors of cancer. So once you segment it out, then you can check whether it's a benign or it's a malignant. So we have been doing that work with this CNCI, the National Cancer Institute. So this is like one example. Now you can extend it to like 3D. So for example, like this is this is an organ like in brain, like hippocampus. And then what you are interested in is it's like you want to identify like different parts of the hippocampus. So you see, like this is a single object, but then within that object, you want to identify different subfields. So which have been done using like different colors, right? So this is segmentation of hippocampus subfields from MRI data. This is like one of the works like we have been doing with Arctic University of Norway, where we have this microscopy data, and then from the microscopy data we are trying to identify like this subcellular structures like this microtubule. There are also things known as vesicles, so which are of importance to biologists. So this is another example, and so this is not segmentation, but this is a problem on registration. So here the challenge is like you have a reference image and you have a floating image. So the goal is like that you register the floating image to reference image, and before making any inference, because the imaging conditions could be very different. Even at the top we have this grayscale, and at the bottom we have the color image. These are like retinal data sets. Like this was one of the work we have been doing it with University of Louisville and some time back. And here, like the goal is to register really a floating image like with the anatomical reference image. So whenever you make some inference, so you need to make sure, means whenever you need to make some medical or biological inference, that you need to make sure that difference is not due to imaging condition. So the difference is due to probably something happen like medically. So that's why you have to first register. And even though the imaging conditions are different, I mean, that should not be a problem in making correct inference. So that's why like the registration could be very important. This is another example like where we worked on like muscle stem cell tracking. So that was with the University of Missouri, Columbia. That's also quite some time back. So here there are like multiple problems, like the stem cells, which are as you can see, like we have this small boxes, like so they could get occluded behind like these fibers, or there could be change in the diameter of the stem space. What I mean by that is there could be like cell splits, there could be like cell marks, but you have to still do like a faithful tracking. And this is an example, like as you can see, just like this a green dot. So here, so we did this work again some time back, like with University of California, Irvine, and my former institute where I did my postdoc, NIH, is computer-aided detection of, like pelvic fractures. So you can see like there's very small pelvic fractures, but how can you detect them, like, using computer? So again, how can you detect like correct patterns? Now, moving on to a very different area like multimedia. So here, it was like one of my former PhD students, we published in IEEE Transactions on multimedia. So here is like how you, form a viewboard of, the multi-view summary. So it's like in a room, you have cameras like mounted at different parts of the room. And then you have like videos, and then maybe for, several hours, like you capture the videos, and then finally you infer whether something, anomalous happened in the room. So we have to, fetch this video and then make, an informed decision, an informed summary. So there could be a lot of redundancy because most of the time, maybe like, something is not happening, right? So you have to remove, those redundancy, and this is a summary, and these numbers like 2, 4, 3, 1, and these are actually like, from different cameras, like from which you get this view, and then you can finally stitch to make a decision. This is another interesting example, like where we worked on like action recognition in daily lives. And again, another former is now faculty at NIT, Allahabad. This we published in IEEE Transactions on image processing. So here, if you remember, like example which I showed that how you detect an action and how you localize it. So you report like, okay, in this frame, this action is taking place, and you also show actually where it is taking place. So these are like different regions like which we identify where certain action is taking place, and certain regions are just background, so there are no actions. And the image at the bottom is like even further complicated because here multiple actions are taking place. So for example, let's say I'm talking, so there is some lip movement, and also there is some hand movement, right? So can we detect them simultaneously? So that's even more challenging. And then can you localize like where in the frame they're happening? So this is like using computer and drinking tea. So both are happening simultaneously, and you correctly like localize.
So, Ananda, before we move on to another example,
Yeah.
so I mean, some of the previous examples,
Yeah.
for example, this detection of lung nodule or the
Yeah.
pelvic fracture.
Yeah.
What is the computation activity that is involved? I mean,
Algorithm.
not into get too much details,
Yeah,
but
so I'll show like one example where I talk a little bit. So these are like some of the sort of like glancing through what we have done. But like there is one algorithm, like so two algorithms I discussed, which is one on which I also mentioned in the abstract, like which is one on brain tumor segmentation and one is on open set personality ID. So coming to the surveillance part, as you can see on the top, like you have a like this visible camera, and then in the middle row you have a thermal camera, and then how you combine in real time to so this is real time like video fusion, so which was published in TCSVT.
so in the human is not visible in the
Visible, right?
Not visible in the visible
Right.
Why not?
So maybe like some trace or something is put up, like which is now looking like so.
My gosh.
Yeah.
Seems like some malicious
Yeah.
activity.
This is again another surveillance question. So we have detect like different pedestrians here. So this is I told I told a little bit earlier like about anomaly detection. Like as you can see, for anomalous and normal or abnormal and normal scenarios, like how you detect Can you detect in an unsupervised manner? This is, I'll talk about a little bit later on details, like which is a person re-identification problem. So these are like some variants, like if there is, like non-pedestrian objects and non-target pedestrians, so then there are like a lot of occlusions and overlaps, like how can you detect that? Now with this, I felt like it's interesting. I found a few slides where, they use this kind of, pattern classification. So this is a little bit old paper, but then I find like they are trying to identify or trying to like segregate like, stars and galaxies with certain amount of confidence. This is, I don't know whether these boxes are visible, but this is like you can see that for deep space objects, they are trying to, identify. This is a relatively recent paper in 2024. So this is a field of view with a group of galaxies. So these are like small boxes, like which contains like different galaxies. So they're identifying like different galaxies. And this is an archive paper in 2000. Sorry, this is I think should be 2025. And this is like so it's like an advance in time. It's like so this is very interesting because I feel this is an for an evolution of stars actually. So how like AI can detect really the evolution of stars. And I find like a nice a bar graph like which talks about like an increase in the number of papers which connects like ML, machine learning, and astronomy. So
yeah, our ML/astronomy local expert is not present here.
Okay.
There's one of the students who is working on one such paper,
Okay.
but he is in some other workshop now.
Sure. So with that, now let me talk probably a little bit like in a kind of depth first manner rather than a breadth first, like on segmentation of brain tumors. So which we have been pursuing with Institute of Neuroscience, and first author Orijit like who is about to defend his thesis like shortly was working on this. So here, the motivation is like maybe I show a picture which would be better. Like, yeah. So here, like you can see, these are like kind of tumors, and then how you, it's very low contrast with respect to the surroundings, like even here, and it's very, infiltrating, right? Like it's like kind of getting diffused. So that's one of the problems, like which the neuroradiologist has told us. And then how can you detect this? So this is in kind of in 2D, and this is like what we're going to describe the algorithm. But this is kind of in 3D, like this tumor. So what we have done is like maybe I think in this. So we have developed something known as a deep graph cut, like which is a good mix. I always tell that and I've been telling my students that so when you apply deep learning, like so it's very, very rich because it's the way it represents information is very rich. As you can see, there are different layers and repetition of layers, and it's layers serving different functions. But at the same time, like the classical solutions, which used to be flourishing pre-deep learning era, they still have not become irrelevant. So in our group, like one endeavor has been to combine like this deep learning with classical computer vision solutions. So this is where like we mix like deep learning and graph cuts. So I'll talk about graph cuts. So what we developed is kind of deep graph cuts, and it's just not really a cascade, but you have to really develop some insights to see that how like this one solution can benefit the other, and there could be like multiple ways of doing it. In fact, I mean, right now, like I'm like kind of investigating this with one of my colleague at IISc, so friend, colleague at IISc. So I mean, so here basically like we try to show that in the graph cut there is something known as like an energy function, and then how really the deep learning can be used to improve the or reformulate like the energy functions. So the probability maps, as I said, like, if you remember like the CNN model, which I have shown that at the very end, you can apply like a softmax type of function to get the probabilities for, for a voxel to belong to a certain class, right? So you can use that probability to, help improve or to reformulate the energy in the graph card. So I'll talk about that. So we have like new expressions for these terms, and I mean, and please do not worry, like, so what is data term and this term, we'll talk about it. So let's see, like, what we have done for the deep learning part. So for the deep learning part, it's more like, it's taking like a pen from the drawer and writing something with that. So we haven't done really much for the deep learning part. We took this algorithm as it is. So this is like known as a unit, like which is a type of fully convolutional network. And if you look at the structure of this, this unit, but it's done in 3D. So there has like two main components. So one is really this, encoder, like or contraction phase, and then one is really the decoder or the expansion phase. So the main idea is like you kind of in the encoder, like you downsample the image and make some inference, and then at the decoder stage, like you upsample and then try to make the inference at the same resolution. So if you look at this slide, it summarizes this kind of thing. So in the contraction phase, like you reduce spatial dimension, but increases like the power of your answer to the question what. So that means like the voxel classification. And the layer, like if you look at like this, the layer here and the layer here, it's just like the operations can get reversed, right? So each layer contains like 2 3x3 convolutions, 3x3x3, and followed by your ReLU and then a max pooling. And it's, if you read this, it's just kind of the reverse. But then in the expansion phase, which is the decoder phase, like you recover the details, you upsample, and you answer the question like where. So what you do is like when you train your system, you use something known as a weighted cross entropy loss. So if it's like, so I mean, in this problem, like we are interested in the question, like whether it's a tumor or not. So then it would be like a binary cross entropy. So you do a cross entropy. So you actually get as the output the probability map, and we say like voxel because in image we say it's pixel. But then when you look at an image volume, right? So you can just call it like the voxel, the 3D version of the pixel. So you get the probability map of each voxel to belong to whether it's an object or whether it's a background. Now you model image as a graph. So this is a very useful, data structure, like where you can actually encode really the spatial information among the data, or which is inherent in the data. So you take like each pixel of the image as a vertex. So a graph actually consists of a set of vertices and edges. So vertices are connected by edges. So how you do this? Like, so you treat, you take a pixel as vertex, then you connect really the pixels with which are like kind of neighbors with edges. So use the set of edges, and then you can make a different connectivity. So we used actually like in 3D this 26 connectivity. You can think of like a voxel is like within a cube, and then in the center of the cube, and then you put all the voxels at its like different vertices, and then you can connect them at the vertices of the cube. And then you can find really, you can build a weighted graph. So you can put a weight of each edge as a function of similarity, because these are like each voxel will have an intensity value. So you can build a function with that, and then obtain a cut, like to partition the set of vertices. So let me show you a picture like how you do it. So here, this is a very famous algorithm, like the original graph algorithm is by Ford and Fulkerson, like so which applied long time back in early 60s in Canadian Journal of Math. But then like how you can model a segmentation problem as a graph cut problem. So that's why if you look at this paper by Boykov and Joly, which appeared in 2001 at International Conference on Computer Vision, like it has like a huge number of citations, because developing that kind of insight is quite hard. So here, like, what we do is like, you can think of like each of this, PQ as voxels, and you try to build a graph. So you have two classes. One is object class, which you can think of like a tumor class, and there is like a background class. So you connect like each voxel to, your object and background, and then you also connect like, the neighborhoods. So then you connect like the neighborhoods, and then you connect like the background. So you have the graph, like you have two types of links. So you have, something known as like the terminal link, like where you connect to the background and the object, and you can connect like a neighborhood link. Now, what you do with this, like you can develop a kind of energy. So this is really, the energy of the entire image, and this entire image energy can be thought of as like a summation of, the energy which is accruing from the region term and which is also accruing from the boundary term. So this is like from the region term, and this is like the influence of the neighborhood. So it's like the boundary term. So as you can see, like if they're neighbor, they would kind of influence, like P2 belongs to N, right? So what would be the expressions for this? So what you have is like in general, so this is a traditional graph cut. So where you have this object and background, these are kind of inputted by the user as some form of something known as like seeds. So it's just like the object can mark like, okay, these are some pixels like in the, let's say the tumor class and some in the background class. And then you can form a distribution. And then you take really the intensity of a pixel, and then you put it in the distribution to get take the negative logarithm to get the probability of a pixel or voxel in 3D to belong to the object class, which is tumor in this case, and background, like which is non-tumor. And then you can do for the the neighborhood term, like which is like the influence, like how close. Because if you think about something within the region, let's say where I'm pointing my finger, like so this is white, and that's the surrounding is also white, right? So otherwise, like there will be very abrupt boundaries. Only on the edges, like you will have the neighboring influence would be less as compared to like the influence of the terminal links. So this is like the traditional graph cut. Now, what we do is, okay, so before I move on to the deep graph cut, so basically like you want to compute really a global optimum, because what you tell is like you have this energy, and then when you optimize the energy, then you have the optimal segmentation. So there are like nice theorems, but which I'm avoiding here. But like so you want to compute really the global minimum of this energy using the fold function. So what we have done in case of like our deep graph cut, so you can see like now we have like different terms like this BDGC and RDGC. So this is now coming from the deep graph cut. So you have the probability maps from the this unit. Remember, like again from the CNN, right? At the end, you can apply the softmax function to get really the idea of a voxel belong to the object and a voxel belong to the background, right? So you take these probabilities, and good thing is like you now don't need any seeding. So you have more automation, which is always a requirement in computer vision. So you take these probabilities and you apply this in the region term. And naturally, like these probabilities would add up to 1. And then also for the background, for the smoothness term, like you also take this. So you can again take like for a pixel, like the difference to belong to the object class and the background class, like, and then frame like the function. So these are the components like new, and also we use like a term like this, like so some detailed formulation. So how you enrich the energy function of the graph cut. And also as I said, that remember, like they have this the data term and the like the smoothness term, they are kind of weighted. And as I just showed here, like depending upon the pixel's location, right, you have different influence. So the influence of the two terms in the graph cut energy could be adaptive. And you can also make use of the probabilities from the unit to have this influence. So you can have like an adaptive energy function. So that's the main thing. And then if you do that, then these are like some results. So let's say this is ground truth. And then you can see like if it's like a unit, if it's a graph cut, means they are kind of done applied in isolation. And then if you are here, you have like the deep graph cut. So that you can see, it's qualitatively or visually like matching very much with the ground truth, which is also corroborated well by the quantitative values. So this is some measure called as Guy's similarity score, and you can see it's like the highest with the deep graph cuts. Like if you use as compared to like the unit, it's deep learning algorithm, and then graph cut, like the traditional computer vision algorithm, you apply separately, and then you apply it as a combination, like you get better results. And then you can do some comparison. So these are like different ways, like we have improvised like graph cut. So let's say if you only use for the data term, if you only use for the smoothness term and so on. And like if you don't use like the adaptive parameter, if you use an adaptive parameter and so on, and then we get the sort of results. And then this is some comparison with the like the external several state-of-the-art approaches. So for this problem, like we did like detection, delineation, and characterization of 3D brain tumors. And then we derive like new expressions for terms appearing in the graph cut energy function. So in general, like if you have a segmentation problem, like what's the simplest way to do? So basically, like you iterate over each pixel and ask the question that whether this pixel belongs to an object or belongs to a background. So then you have to find out like some holy threshold, but that's very difficult to find. And even if you find that, it's still very local. That means when you are asking question to a pixel, you are not really asking this question to the other pixels. But when you are applying like GraphCut, it's like a global optimizer. So you are not asking question individually to the pixels or voxels in 3D, but then you are asking to the image or the image volume as a whole. So you are asking a single question to the entire input data, and then you are getting the answer to it, right? So that's why like this GraphCut has become very popular. But then it has like its own problems, like you can make it further rich because now you have a rich information representation using like deep learning. So use those probabilities and then like bring in in the GraphCut. And then I mean you can actually extend to multi-level tumor segmentation, but actually we have done that later, like when we use for this hippocampus, like we did that. So let me move on quickly to the second problem, which is a very different problem from the surveillance area, which is called like an open set person re-identification. And so Arindam, who worked on this, like, so he was also an undergrad of JU actually. So he is now a postdoc at UK, and we have very good like undergrads in JU as like here. So this Arpon and Vibodip, like, so Vibodip is now doing a PhD at NUS. And so they were undergrad. So they were part of this beautiful work, which we published in IC. So let's look at what is a person re-identification problem. So I think a good instance would be, let's say, these two. So let's say, or maybe like the campus probably would be a better. So, like let's say like from one gate a person has entered like the university, and then we don't track it. So there is a difference between a tracking problem, which is also a quite well-known problem in computer vision, and a person re-identification. So when you solve a tracking problem, then that means like the one, for example, which I showed for this muscle stem cell tracking, right? So you are continuously monitoring really your object of interest. But here, like we don't do that. So maybe the person has entered from one gate, and then we lost track. So we're not tracking the person. But then maybe from another gate we have a camera, and then we are just making a list like which persons are exiting through that gate. And and then we try to find like the person who has entered, whether he has really left or he's still in the campus. But meantime, many things can happen, right? Like the person can change his posture. The person can change his clothes. The person can put a hat. There could be like change in weather condition. So all these things make very difficult of identifying the same person. So we are re-identifying the same person. So that's what makes it like a person re-identification. So as you can see here, like in the schematic, like so this camera A and camera B, but then these are two different locations. And here also, as you can see, so there is a query or a probe image, and this is a sort of gallery image, and then we try to find out. So you see, like just the person has turned, same person, right? But it's quite difficult to do. It's maybe as humans we can identify, recognize the patterns, but it's not that easy to find the person. Like if he just says turned his back and is leaving through another gate, right? So what is open set, which makes the problem further difficult? Well, so you see, this is a closed set, right? It's all trees, right? But then think about like, which is outside the closed set, right? It's kind of everything. So it's very difficult. Like, let's say, if I give a tree and then, and just give, let's say, maybe everything here, then even I don't know whether the tree is a part of this, right? So that's make it like kind of open, which is a harder problem to solve. So in case of open set recognition, like as you can see here, right, you have like, this dogs, like different types of dogs, but then here we also have like something other than them, right? So these are unknown. So we have like, this goal is to kind of, take an inference on all of them. Well, if it's a bull, we can infer. If it's, a husky, we can infer, but how about them? We haven't seen it, right? So it's a difficult problem. So if you think about it, in terms of like quantitative measures. So like if it's a husky which we have seen, then we can classify it like a software. So we can have a very high confidence level, right? Like a high probability with which we classify this. So it's like 0.97 and maybe it's bull 0.03, right? Similarly, like it's a bull, right? It's 0.99 and it's 0.01. How about this? Like, so it's a kind of unknown, like it's like 0.63 to bull and 0.37 to husky. So there are some values, but whether we are still going to classify it, whether we are still going to ascribe a level that, okay, this is still bull. So that's an open question. So when you reject, and that leads to something known as like an, we'll see, like we have done that with using Weibull distribution, which is a fall off from extreme value theorem. But this is a very interesting question. So when you reject, actually, right? So if you compare the open set and closed set VID, so here you have like this, all probe persons are in the gallery set. That's big sure, right? So this frames, or you can say like a video frame. So it's still a video-based problem, but it's not tracking. Like it's we lost like what is happening in between, right? But then we are looking maybe at entry exit points and so on. And in open set, like you have at least some probe which is not in the gallery set. So then, as I said, like, so when you infer, because maybe you can still find the match with some of these, in the gallery sets, like in some of the frames in the gallery set. So then you have to take a call, like you have to do a rejection that no, so this probe set like will not, like consider, right? And then, or maybe just said like it's not there in the gallery set, right? So how will we infer that? And then if it is there, then you should say that, okay, this is there with this probability. So this frame-wise re-identification problem, and again, the gallery set is also dynamically changing. Probe set can be larger than gallery set. So what we do is using like a Weibull rejection, like we map the problem to a from closed set to open set, the challenge becomes more, but then using a Weibull rejection, we try to cast the open set problem as a closed set problem and then take a decision. So the contribution here is like, because this is more realistic open reality setting, like, so this is like, a challenge in computer vision. So it's becoming more and more unconstrained, very long duration videos. You try to summarize, you try to make it concise. I try to gather a concise information. Well, for a small duration video, it's okay. But maybe for several hours, right, it's difficult to do. So whether its algorithm is scalable, remember like the key challenge, which I placed earlier. And then, it's more unconstrained. So it's very noisy and so on, like, but then still you want to, make some decision. So what we did is like a joint optimization of Weibull distribution and like a Mohanovich metric based on like this I mentioned, which is an open set. And this is like large margin nearest neighbor loss. And then perform re-ID, dynamically. And then, this, as I said, like converting like an open set to a closed set re-ID by, rejecting some probe samples. So this is a re-ID framework, like, as you can see here that, so this is like the main thing. We have the learning metric, which would be like a Mohanovich metric and plus, a Weibull distribution. So these are like some curves characterized by, this shape parameter beta and the scale factor lambda. So let's look at, this pedestrian detection. So first we want to, because this is a scene, right? So we don't give you like just the pedestrian. So from the scene, like you have to first detect like a pedestrian. And I see like this is very interesting because, the picture which I have shown, for the deep sky objects, like we're trying to still mark the different galaxies using bounding box, right? So here also we are still trying to detect a lot of like, this kind of detection algorithms are there in computer vision, like, and very good deep learning, algorithms are there. So this is again not our contribution because we have just again used what is available, like the mask RCNN. And once you have that, here we didn't apply actually, deep learning for feature extraction. So here we use like a traditional descriptors, like as you can see, like it's a bag of words, like this linear binary patterns based on histograms and then so on, like LOMO. And so these are like traditional features. So these are the two. Well, this is one of them, and the other will come on the slide also. So we try to have this Mohanovich distance matrix. So actually, this X, these are actually the feature vectors. These should be actually vectors, and this is really the covariance matrix, and this is the inverse covariance matrix. So if it's really like an Euclidean distance, then this becomes an identity matrix. So you can have a squared Euclidean distance as like kind of X transpose X. Basically. So it's like the difference in the two vectors. But if it's like a Mohanovich matrix, then this doesn't become an identity matrix. And then you have a large margin nearest neighbor loss. So okay, so what is this? So the principle is from this picture. So what we have is something known as like a push-pull. So what is that? As you can see here, like, so we have this yellow R, or the yellow dots are, or yellow circles are samples from like one class, right? And then like this blue and red. So what we want to do is put that like blue and red samples like which are from different classes, like so we want to some details. So main thing is like when you do a push, so this is the Maranovic metric. So when you do a push pull, point like so a learned Weibull distribution. So let me show this. Like if you look at this Weibull PDF probability density function and cumulative distribution function, then you can see this is a monotonically increasing function, and then we made use of this. So the idea is like if you like dynamically adjust the push pull. So remember, like earlier, this was like just mu and 1 minus mu. Now these are kind of variables. Like so, what we want to do is, if you have a smaller distance between dissimilar pairs, then we increase really the weight for the push factor as compared to that of the pull factor, and vice versa. So that's the main thing. So this is coming from really the Weibull distribution. So this adaptive part is coming from the Weibull distribution. So this is the main trick. So you combine, this element, large margin nearest number, along with this Weibull rejection, and then you try to find the optimization. You add a regularizer, which is a standard thing to do, and where n is the number of value. Well, so triplets is kind of, you have an anchor, which is let's say representative of a class, and then you have one sample like which is from the same class as the anchor, and there is an imposter. So you make that a sample and anchor close, and then the sample and the imposter like a distance like far. So this is but this can you need to have a control with the regularizer, and then you use a standard optimizer to solve this. So once you do that, like this is the sample, this is the Weibull rejection mechanism. So probe sample rejected by all samples in the gallery, inferred as absent, and then how we do it, because it's in the tail of the distribution, which is less than a threshold. Here are some again results. So here we do like, this is more like sensitivity specificity. So this is detection and identification rate versus false acceptance rate. And then what we do is we use like different detectors to see which one is, for all detectors, like whether we are, like this OS11 is giving good results. And when you change, the detector again, like whether we are like standing, like, so it's not that because of the detector we are getting the good results, it's independent of the detector. And then you can also do for like different features. So again, so for different detectors for different features, like if your final learning algorithm stands, then that means like, this is independent, means like for all of them, like you are doing the. So this is like the new metric learning model for OpenSet. We used like Weibull projection added to SLMNN. And as future what we can use fully deep learning. So we use a part of deep learning for the detector, but not for the rest part. So this could be done. And also you could make, in your learning, like you can bring in kernels, like, this kernelized SVMs, they are, pretty popular, things like that to make it more robust. So as a conclusion, we tried, some basic ideas of computer vision pattern recognition and showed like they are also kind of very much influenced or become powerful by machine learning, deep learning, so that bolster computer vision pattern recognition. So we showed some applications from different domains. And then the two problems which we discussed are like combination of deep learning and graph depths for long modules and OpenSet metric learning for personality identification. So these are some future trends. In fact, we have also been doing some of these works, like so last, this brain tumor classification and here Parkinson's disease are from our group. But these are very popular, like so graph convolutional networks, like where you have like deep learning on graphs. And graphs are very powerful in handling like, regular and irregular data. So how you do that? And then explainable AI. So this is even I also found in the paper on this astronomy, like where they're saying that, okay, you get some results, but can you explain really? And that's one big problem, like which you can easily explain with classical solutions. But for deep learning, it has like so many layers and all these. It's bit difficult to explain that. For GC and explainability is even a more difficult issue. So I end with an acknowledgement. So the main two works like which we have discussed is one from origin like this brain tumor and the other from Ananda. And of course, like I have shown other results and basically like what I can show is because of like the members in our group work much harder than me. So so my acknowledgement to other members and Dr. Munatiwadi from Chicago. So he was the neuroradiologist for the brain tumor project. And with that, thank you.
Okay.